Hello there. Welcome to our very first ASM live show. This is your host, Anthony Samuel Mwerore, and I'm very happy that you're tuned in. It's the second day of February, the year 2018, and it's such a wonderful time that we are going to have today. And I welcome each and every person that is going to come on. As you come on, I ask you to share this live video as we are going to have a great time together. Now, and we have a very wonderful guest. The name is Stephen. He will be with us in just a few seconds. And we are going to welcome him and we are going to hear what he has to tell us. Hi, there is our guest today.
Good morning.
Stephen. Hello, good morning, Stephen. How are you?
I'm very well, Anthony.
Yeah,
it's good to be here.
Welcome. Yeah, it's wonderful. So, this is Anthony, and I'm calling. I'm presenting all the way from Athens, Greece. And Stephen, where are you?
I'm in London. I'm in snowy northwest London today, very close by to Wembley Stadium. So, yeah, we're connected London and Athens today.
That's wonderful. Athens is bright today. It has been quite cold, but the weather is improving. Very soon it's going to be summer, and we have a longer summer than there in London, as I understand.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like that this year. We're not getting a spring at all, it looks like.
Yes. Yeah, so we welcome you. And we are asking each and every one of you, the viewers, please invite as many people as you can when you log on. And if you get to see this live show after it's done, you can still share it with your friends. But that will be much more later. So we won't take much more time, but we will just go straight to what we have today on this our very first time ASM live show. And we are honored. It's such a great honor to have such a great man with us today who is going to tell us about finding your voice and being your authentic self. And to start with,
yes.
Stephen, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
Well, good morning. Good morning, Anthony. It's great to be here. Welcome everybody who's watching.
Yep.
So my name's Stephen. I'm 28 years old. I live in London. I've got a big Irish family, so that maybe explains my strange accent to anybody listening today. And I'm working at the moment to advise the legal profession, so that's solicitors and lawyers. And I'm helping them to deal with issues caused by Brexit, which I'm sure everybody is familiar with. So I help advise them how to get their concerns about Brexit over to the government and over to people, MPs and peers who are working in Parliament. So it's a lot of speech writing, it's a lot of briefings, it's a lot of meetings with politicians and so on and so forth. And one thing I do in my free time that I like to do a lot of is to coach people in public speaking, because it's something that I've been practicing a lot.
Sorry?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Sorry, there was a bit of interruption there. So maybe you can tell us again what you like doing on your free time?
Oh, sure. Yeah. One thing I like to do a lot of in my free time is to, one, practice my own public speaking, but two, also to coach other people as well and help them improve, because it's a big anxiety and fear that people have, in my experience. And I get an awful lot out of helping people become more confident and being able to improve their communication skills, because it's such a fundamental thing. And I think people just don't get the opportunity to do it, or they're afraid to put themselves out there and stand in front of people, which is understandable. But that's one thing I'm doing a lot of, and I hope we talk a lot more about that this morning.
Oh, yeah, that's wonderful. So that's what it's all about, finding your voice and being your very authentic self. That's it, yeah?
That's it, yeah. Something I...
Yeah.
yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, so tell us, tell us maybe how you really found your voice and you have been your authentic. Were you born that way? I mean, have you always been that way? You've been able to speak and maybe teach other people how to speak from the time that you were born?
No, no, not always. I'm somebody I think
Yeah,
who, I guess when I was a teenager, I would find that I would really struggle to sort of speak my mind and voice my opinion in certain
yeah.
situations.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly when I was at university up in Sheffield, it was something I really was very conscious of. And it always used to frustrate me, and I used to wonder, why is that? Why do I feel so restricted when I'm sort of out with people and out in public? And yeah, frankly, it got to a point at university in my first year. I remember being sort of in halls up there, living with other people, and I just remember like the low point was me like not even being able to go up and speak to people, even who I liked, even people whose company I enjoyed. And I just thought, this is this isn't right. This isn't normal. This isn't natural. Like what's going on here, sort of thing. So since then, um, I've sort of forced myself to go along to public speaking workshops. I forced myself to go to an acting course, which really, really helped me
Mm-hmm.
um, sort of be transparent, to be honest with you, because that's a lot of what actors do. There's a misconception that actors sort of fake things, and they're misleading people and putting on a mask. But actually, um, actors very often, they're among the most sincere, genuine people out there, because they have to play characters very often. So what they have to do before they do that is to tap into who they are as people, and learn how to express themselves and communicate themselves in a very smooth, transparent way. So there's lots of that I've been doing over the last couple of years. There's lots of that, and I'm happy to go into more detail about that if you like.
Yeah, yes, wonderful, wonderful. I mean, because yes, when we see the actors on TV and we see that maybe that's just something that has been he's been trained to do that, so that's not him, his real self. And we know is that if you have to bring out something very good, you have to it has to be coming from inside of you. So the issue is not to teach them how to do it, but what to bring, whatever it is inside of themselves. I get you. Is that right?
Yeah, it is. I think fundamentally, uh, they talked about we have
Mm. Uh,
a was
uh, I, I think there's a bit of interruption. There's quite a bit of interruption on your side. I don't know.
okay.
Maybe you don't have some good network.
Okay.
Because we didn't get quite a bit of that, what you've just said, we didn't get much of it. Hello, hello, Stephen.
Is that better,
Hello.
Anthony? Hello, I'm back. Sorry about that.
Yep,
Is that better?
it's okay. Now, yeah, we can hear. Now, maybe we can go through that part, that last part that you just told us.
Sure. What I was saying was, I think we all have a sixth sense. When we meet people, when we hear somebody stand up and speak, we have a sixth sense about how sincere and authentic that person is being. As much as we might think we're able
Mm-hmm.
to, very often what people do is when they stand up and give a speech is very often they put on an act, so to speak. They put on sort of a mask and a layer, and they try to appear sort of more confident than they feel. They try and
Yeah.
act like a very sort of corporate speaker, you know, like someone giving a TED talk, and they think, oh, this is what a confident person looks like. This is how they express themselves. And so they then try and mimic and imitate what that person does.
Yeah.
And I think people can sort of see through that. And what resonates with people is when you see the human being in the other person. When you're listening to somebody, you know, tell a story, for example, or delivering a message, we're listening to what they're saying. You know, we're listening to the content of it. But really, we want to hear a real person delivering that message. We don't want to hear someone who's pre-scripted, or, you know, someone sounding robotic and just sort of repeating something they've memorized or pre-scripted. So one of the big messages that I like to give people in public speaking is that, you know, you as a person, you know, your personality is one of your biggest advantages, because you're unique as a person and nobody else can be you more than you can yourself. So you should use, you know, yourself as a tool, if you like. You should sort of let your guard down in front of your audience and let them see you for all of your imperfections as well. This is another thing that this is another theme that comes up very often. You know, we as people, sometimes we try and cover up our shortcomings, our weaknesses, um, our vices, you know, addictions, etc., because we think, you know, it makes us seem
Yeah.
weak or, you know, inferior to other people, and we don't want to be seen in that way. But what I try and get across to people is, people really, when you're out there in public speaking settings, when you're out there communicating with people, yes, they want to hear somebody who's competent and effective and, you know, who can communicate clearly, but they also want to,
Mm-hmm.
they want somebody who's real and someone who's being themselves and someone who's not trying to, you know, be fake or false or mislead them or any of these things. So that's another key
Yeah.
theme also.
Mm-hmm. Okay. It's wonderful. Now, as you stand up to speak, what I have always heard people say is that, or rather, I may have experienced a bit of it sometime, that public speaking is one of the greatest fears that human have. Did you ever experience that fear when you are starting up? I
Oh,
mean, you stand up and
yeah. Oh,
yeah.
definitely, Anthony. Oh, 100%. I remember very early
Mm-hmm.
experience in particular. I think it was maybe probably the second or third time I'd gone to sort of a public speaking drop-in workshop. So I'd done it once or twice
Mm-hmm.
before, and I remember sitting down in the audience, and we were taking it in turns to speak. And you know, when
Yeah.
it's your turn coming up soon to speak, and you know that, and you know you're starting to
Mm-hmm.
feel
Mm-hmm.
nervous about that. I remember getting this awful feeling of dread. Really, there's no other way to describe it. As I was waiting for my turn to speak, and it was really deep down in my sort of diaphragm, deep down in my belly. It was like as if something
Yeah.
horrible was happening or was about to happen, and
Mm-hmm.
this feeling was saying to me, I'll never forget it. The feeling was saying to me, you should, you know, you get out of this room now. You know, be anywhere but right here, right now, about to go up and give a short speech to these people. And I, since then, I've told this story often to people. I just remember thinking just sort of how ridiculous that is. Um, all we're doing is standing up in a room and simply having a conversation, a dialogue with a group of people, and it's extraordinary how our minds can sort of talk us out of doing things as simple as that.
Yeah.
So yeah, in that moment, like,
Yeah.
you know, when people say, they talk about an experience and they say, "Oh, if a hole had opened up in the ground, you know, I would have jumped in and I want the world to swallow me up." That was how I felt, and I hadn't even started speaking yet as well. But the positive thing about it is, Anthony, is every time I've done it since then, that feeling has diminished, It's gotten smaller and it's not as strong as it was before. And that's part of the key of it is to, do this sort of thing very often to practice. Because the fears and the nerves, they never go away, but you can manage
Yep.
them a lot better. You can use them um, for better effects. You can actually use that nervous energy to give a better speech.
Oh, it's wonderful, wonderful to hear that. I mean, that everybody is not only me who's had an experience of that nature, because if we have someone who is already an experienced person, someone who is successful in even coaching about speech, tell me that yes, I have had that experience before. I've had the pain in the stomach, is a
Yeah,
good revelation for someone who is viewing us there and maybe has experienced the pain and has stopped going on. Now, let me put it this way. This is the same thing that happens on these Facebook Live. I mean, not everybody is able to do Facebook Live. I mean,
I wasn't able
someone
to.
says, "Oh, I cannot put myself."
Yeah, until a few days ago,
Huh?
with your help.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. So it's okay. So we even in that area we can start coaching people on how to do Facebook Live, because it's not an easy thing how to do it even when you're starting up. But it's good to keep on doing so that you get good at it. Same in it's so they go hand in hand with the public speaking, I believe.
Yeah, they do. I think another thing I say very often about this is, it's like a muscle,
Yep.
in the gym. If you're
Mm-hmm.
training your bicep or say your shoulders or something, you're putting it under repeated strain, is what you're doing. You're putting it
Yeah.
under pressure, intelligent pressure consistently. And it's the same principle with
Yeah.
speaking, with anything you find difficult and challenging. You have to step it up to develop and grow. You can't just go to the gym and lift the exact same weight all the time. You have to lift
Yeah.
heavier loads and you have to make it more difficult and tricky on yourself. Otherwise, you just start plateauing then. So that's something that I try and do a lot of, and I try and um, sort of ambush people in my workshops and make them do really difficult stuff when I can see that they're getting confident and they're getting more accustomed to it. That's great, but you have to keep pushing people because, yeah, you can plateau and get bad habits, obviously.
Um, So I think you're actually talking about getting out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we always like to be comfortable. We don't want to face challenges. We don't want to be to be open, to be at the risk of. I mean, this is what I mean. So the thing is to put out ourselves there and be hard and be open to even criticism, because not everybody is gonna say, "Oh, you're doing a good work."
Of
So
course.
that's what I believe. Yep, that's what I believe that. And this being even our first live show, I believe that you're doing quite well, and we believe that we're gonna be even much more better in the future if we keep going out there and doing it.
Yes.
Now, apart from this, the pain in the stomach when you started to speak, maybe can you tell us some other challenges that you faced along the way that someone out there who is viewing us can get from you, that the challenges that you've been through and you have overcome and you have become the person that you are right now?
Yeah, sure. I think that's a really good question as well.
Yeah.
One thing I
Mm-hmm.
experienced as well, maybe others have experienced this as well, is I think part of the anxiety from public speaking and anxiety in general is this feeling of when you have all
Mm-hmm.
those eyes on you as you stand up or when you go into a room, for example. And
Yep.
very often you can
Mm-hmm.
sort of be paranoid, if you like, or you can think that people are judging you, criticizing you as you're speaking, as you're trying to get your point across. And this was something that I experienced
Yep.
when I was younger. I used to edit what I was saying in my head. You know, I would be stuck in my head and like the words will not come out. I would be very sort of shy and quiet and restricted. I would be preempting what others would be thinking of me before I'd even said anything, which is obviously doesn't make for conducive communication. One thing in particular
Okay.
that I sort of talk to people about in my workshops is this sort of sensitivity to people's basically their facial expressions when you are speaking. And the point I try to get across to them is that is your mind playing tricks on you. That is your mind trying to sabotage you, essentially, where it's giving you sort of false signals that people are either disinterested in what you're saying, that they don't respect you, for example, that you're talking nonsense, that you don't know what you're talking about, etc., etc. But what I say to people is, when you're standing up to speak, you're talking about ideas, you're talking about experiences, you're talking about your opinion, and all of these things. And naturally, when we're listening to people talk about these things, we then reflect upon what we think about that, and we reflect upon our own experiences of that. We're still listening to the other person, you know, we haven't lost interest in what they're saying, but inevitably we start reflecting on what that means for us. And so what that can lead to is people, frankly, looking very serious, frankly, you know, having very pensive and stern sort of expressions. But that is not because of the speaker opposite them
Yeah.
very often. It's because they're simply taking on
Yeah.
board what they're listening to. And some people who come to my workshops, they're very sensitive to how other people are reacting to them. And it's something I really try and close that gap, you like, that chasm between them as the speaker, as the communicator, and the audience in front of them. People who have an anxiety, they see this thing as a huge gap. And what I try and do is I try and sort of close that gap and say, you know, you've all got more in common than you think. We all have the same sort of thoughts about this. You know, we're all human beings. We've got a lot more in common than you think. These are all shared experiences we have. It's not as separate and distinct an experience as you think it is. So that's one thing in particular.
Okay. And you are able to overcome that challenge of the people thinking about you when you're standing. Is there, maybe, if you can tell to the person who is viewing us, is there maybe something that you have to do, something psychologically, I mean, or physically? I mean, you've talked briefly about what you do, the perception that you get from the person that is watching you. But is there something like physically, like stretching, like breathing, like this that can get you, that you used to get over that fear, that challenge, that setback?
Yeah, there's plenty of things you can do.
Yeah.
You can relax your body, for example, is one thing you can do, because what your body does in tense situations is, you know, it stores tension in your muscles. And what you need to do is you need to become conscious of when your body sort of tightens up like this, you know, when you're carrying tension. Very often we don't even realize it.
Yeah.
So when you're giving a speech, you might notice, you know, you forget to breathe, for example, you forget to relax, and things like this. So there's meditation things you can do. You can really ground yourself and slow down before you enter a scenario like this. So breathing, meditation, relaxation is one thing you can do. Two, sort of coming back to the practice element, and you know, I guess coming out of your comfort zone and becoming accustomed to that is eye contact, which I alluded to in my last answer. Becoming used to having lots of pairs of eyeballs on you if you're speaking to a room full of people. If you can do that a few times and you can get accustomed to that feeling, That will only help you in future. That will only help you become a more fluent and effective speaker. And the flip side of that is also you have to become accustomed to you making eye contact with other people as well, because that's something that some people struggle with also, especially in London. Like, I don't know if you've been to London yourself, Anthony, but when you get on the tube.
No, not quite yet, but I'm looking forward to it.
Well, I'll be glad to meet up with you when you do come over. But one thing people do in London is they get on the tube, the sort of subway, and they just don't look at people. They look everywhere but at sort of the person's eyeballs.
Yeah,
So there's lots of exercises that I do to get people in that sort of mode as well, because it can be quite an intimate thing actually as well, making eye contact with people
yeah.
over an extended period of time.
Hmm.
And I guess the third thing I would say is with the mind element, that I mentioned earlier, is with impromptu speaking. Another thing I like to do is I like to throw
Yeah.
people in at the deep end and basically have them talk about a topic
Hmm.
off the cuff with no preparation at all,
Yeah.
and they just have to improvise. You just have to, you're given a topic, so something like, I don't know, the snow or something, or sharks, let's say. You get a topic thrown at you, and then you have to
Hmm.
speak for roughly 2 minutes about that topic. And
Okay.
it's almost like a stand-up comedian. It's almost that same element. You have to work with what's in front of you. You're given very little in terms of content, so you then you
Hmm.
become very well. You become very skillful with practice at sort of just thinking on your feet, and just speaking about things with very little preparation and content, and that really, really builds confidence as well.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Those are great, wonderful things that you are letting us know about being our authentic self and finding our voice. Now, I know that the much that we can discuss on this episode is very little compared to what you offer in your workshops that you have been doing. Now, let me ask you, how long have you been doing these workshops?
I'd say best part of 2 years, I suppose, maybe 18 months, 12 months, really.
Oh,
So I'm
it's wonderful. And
yeah.
you're quite, you say you're quite?
I was saying I guess I'm quite new to this, as in like I'm quite young. Um, I've been doing a lot of it in a short space of time. I'm somebody who just likes to pack a lot into my weeks and into my days. So I found that I've progressed quite quickly, so to speak.
Yeah, it's wonderful, wonderful. But I can guess you've been quite successful. By the way, at this point, let me mention someone that has commented there, Sin Hopkins, and I think has tagged someone, Halan Abu. Sin Hopkins, maybe you have something to tell us. You can write down there as we are moving on. Maybe you are glad with this episode, or you have a question, and any other person there who is watching us live, you can put the question there,
Yeah,
and our guest Stephen can answer it as we are moving on.
ask us
Now,
anything.
I was saying, Stephen, yeah, I was saying, Stephen, I believe that with that short time duration of time, you've been able to be quite successful and are doing quite wonderful things. Because the last time that I have seen you, you were not in London. You are out of London and somewhere in the States,
That's right.
maybe doing the same workshops. If I'm not, yeah. So, which other country have you been to?
So I've been to Rwanda in Africa. Uh,
Yeah,
I went there last year
yeah,
in the summer.
wonderful.
It was
That's
wonderful.
close to where I come from.
What you're from?
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
Kenya. I'm
Kenya.
from Kenya
Yeah,
myself.
that's right.
and yeah, it's close to Rwanda, and so it's wonderful that you've been to Rwanda. I ask the same. I mean, maybe the next time that you fly to Africa, you come to Kenya, and I fly from Athens, and we go to Kenya, and we do some of these kind of
Oh,
workshops to people,
definitely,
because
yeah.
people do need these kind of workshops. Yeah, that would be wonderful. So Rwanda, yeah, go on.
Yes, so yeah, I went to Rwanda last August for 11 days, and it was
Yeah.
a social action
Mm-hmm.
trip and project. And what I was
Yep.
doing there was I was
Mm-hmm.
volunteering in secondary schools there, and I and other
Yeah.
volunteers were helping to train teachers there, helping them to deliver and sort of communicate their new curriculum, because what they were doing in Rwanda was they were moving from a French language based curriculum to an English language curriculum. So
Okay.
yeah, it was fantastic. It's probably the best thing I've ever done, the best experience I've had. It was helping them to,
Oh,
to facilitate, helping them to sort of lead lessons, obviously, because that's what they're doing as teachers, and teaching them sort of exercises and strategies for getting their messages across, really, and how you vary up the
okay.
lessons to maximize engagement from people and maximize attention, and keep people interested and engaged. That's something I frequently have to do in my own workshops. I have to like make sure to take
Yeah.
breaks and things. You can see people like people falling asleep and their eyes glazing over, because you have to break it up. You have to vary how you're doing things. It's a big part of it.
Yeah.
But that was fantastic, and I'm also hoping
Mm-hmm.
to be able to go to Tanzania this year as well, going
Oh,
on a similar trip, similar social action project, and hopefully climbing
okay.
Mount Kilimanjaro also.
Kilimanjaro.
Yes.
It's a wonderful place. It's just Tanzania is just neighbors with Kenya. So once you hop to Tanzania, you can make a point of flying over to Nairobi also. It's quite close.
I'll make a point of that. I'll keep you updated, Anthony.
Yeah, we'll keep each other updated on activities. Now we are moving on, and I don't know whether we've been joined by any other person that is not visible here and would like to say something before we are off air. Uh, Let me ask you. I think you've talked about one of the best times that you've had in your experiences. That's what I believe that could be one of the best experiences that you have had in your speaking, in your workshops, in your trainings.
One of the best
Yeah,
experiences that I've
but
had.
yeah, was that the best, or there is another best one that you've had in your life?
That's a really good question.
The experience.
Um,
Yeah.
I don't think one experience stands out, but one thing I experienced quite early on when I was doing this, still now, is is basically that point when the workshop ends, when I stop,
Yeah.
when I bring things to a close, and I'm
Hmm.
reflecting on how it's gone and how I think what people took from it and everything. And it's just the moment when people are coming up to
Yeah.
you afterwards, and in the days after that as well, when I'm getting feedback and sort of testimonials from people as well. It's just something I love to hear. Like, not like, I don't mean like people paying me compliments necessarily, but I just really love to hear when people say, thank you so much. Like, I haven't done this is the first time I've done something like this. I've avoided doing public speaking for most of my life. Very often you have people who are quite
Hmm.
old, people in their sort of 40s and even older, and they come along
Yeah.
and they really challenge themselves, and some of them are really good as well. Some of them are really good speakers, despite their lack of practice. And that's a really positive experience for me when people come up to me and sort of share uh, their own experiences and how they've developed in a short space of time very often, and how they've changed their opinion of how they see doing things like this, about putting themselves out there and all the rest of it. That's why I do this, Anthony. It's I wouldn't do it
Oh,
otherwise.
that's wonderful.
Yeah.
That's quite wonderful. It's such a great thing to imagine, or to meet with someone whose life has changed because of something that you've done, and something that you've said to them is always a very great experience. So I get your viewpoint, that is one of the most rewarding moments in someone's life, and especially now that you're training. And now you see, you have the world in your hands. You're gonna move around the world. You're gonna change millions of people, because this could be just, as you say, you are still young in this area. It's still, there's still some big room that you can expand and do quite much more things.
Absolutely.
The world is waiting.
Yeah, like Scarface,
Yeah.
the movie. The world is yours.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, you make a serious point there. I think we alluded to this in one of our previous answers. It's such a fundamental thing, how you communicate with
Yeah.
people. You know, when you leave the house in
Mm-hmm.
the morning, when you're out there, you're going to work, you're constantly speaking to people, having conversations. You might have to give speeches and presentations and all the rest of it. And as I said before,
Mm-hmm.
certainly the schools I went to when I was younger, it wasn't something they necessarily made a priority of. And I think that's the wrong approach at all. So
Yeah.
there's lots of scope there. There's lots of people. I'm making a really obvious point, a really trite point, but you know, there's lots of people around the world who no doubt want to improve how they communicate with people, and they want to feel more confident about being able to express themselves, and you know, have this feeling of being understood when they're speaking and all the rest of it. It's a very positive thing, and uh, it becomes very reinforcing after a while. It's a very positive cycle, and the more and more you do this, it gets you into a very um, uplifting, forward-looking mindset as well. You get a very positive attitude from all of this.
Yeah.
The way I put it,
Is
Anthony,
wonderful.
is it puts rocket boosters under your sort of self-esteem and confidence. That's one way I like to say it, because that's what I experienced.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Now, now, there's so much that we could cover, although time is running out, and
Yes.
we may be ending soon. The time is running out, and maybe you've mentioned the best of times. Can I ask you whether you have ever had the worst of time, apart from the pain that you had in this stuff? Would there be a time that you had the worst experience?
In what sense do you mean, Anthony?
In your workshops, as you're training, or and also in your speaking, as a speaker, maybe you've had some bad experience, and you say, "Oh, I
Yeah,
wouldn't want
yeah.
to."
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, less so than since I've started doing this. I'll give you a couple. I'll go through them quite quickly. Um, in a previous job
Yeah.
I had, before I started doing any of this, I remember being in a team meeting, and each of us had to give like a very informal, very short talk about a piece of work. And I remember speaking about it, and I remember thinking, God, like that, I'm sure that was terrible. Like that, I really did a poor job of that. I really didn't come across confidently. I don't think anyone understood what I was saying. I felt really uncomfortable at the time, and I, I think that might have been one of the moments that sort of pushed me over the edge to finally get me to go along and develop myself in that area. And also, just briefly on that as well, um, do you know when you have a team meeting in the workplace and you're going
Yeah.
round the table to update people on what you've got on that week. I used to hate that as well. I used to get like a really horrible feeling as it got to be my turn. Just wanted to say that briefly. As far as my workshops goes, in terms of like a less than optimal experience I've had there, I can just think of one occasion where I was trying to generate sort of a group discussion about something. I don't remember what it was about now. I was standing up there, I was asking lots of questions, I was trying to impart my own experience into things, and I just could sense there wasn't sort of energy coming back from me from the audience, and that's something you get when you do these things. I noticed it with the teaching in Rwanda as well, actually. And
Okay.
you can't second guess it too much. There's also, you can look at ways you can improve what you're doing. You
Yeah.
can obviously be self-reflective in that regard, but you can't beat yourself up about it too much. As long as you're trying your best, you've prepared. You can't make other people do things, and nor should you want to. You can't force people to sort of if you think of it like a tennis match, Anthony, you're on one
Yeah.
side of the court, someone is on the other side of the court. There's only so many times you can hit the ball over the net, and if the ball's not coming back, then you have to
Mm-hmm.
just say, okay, fine, we'll move on, we'll do something else, and we'll go another day.
Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm.
But that's life as well, isn't it? It's
Yeah.
life. When
Yeah.
you're
That's life.
yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So, are there people you look up to?
Yeah, yes, without a doubt. Presumably, you'd like me to name them.
If you find it comfortable,
Yeah,
if you can name them. Mm.
yeah. I don't know if you're familiar with Les Brown, the motivational
Les
speaker.
Brown.
Yes.
Yeah.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think I've probably listened to almost all of his speeches on YouTube. Um,
Yeah.
he came over to London, I think last month actually. He came over to Westminster.
Yeah. That was last month.
That was last
Yeah.
month.
You had
Yeah.
a workshop last month. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. I know a couple of people who went to it actually. I would have liked to have gone myself. Um, I really look up to him. A lot of speakers like him, they talk about experiences they've had in childhood and things when they were younger, and without sort of
Yeah.
rehashing all of that, um, they get to a point where they use those experiences to motivate them and propel them on to be the people who they want to be. They don't let it define them. They don't let it trap them or hold them down. They just accept, this happened when I was younger. I was like this at a certain
Mm-hmm.
age. I was doing X, Y, and Z, or I was hanging around with this crowd. But that's life. You are the author of your own story. You are not the words that are written on the page. That is not you as a person. That's just what you
Yeah.
have experienced. That's just things that have happened
Mm-hmm.
in the past. But at any time, you can take the pen and you can write a different story. You can write a new chapter. So that's one of the many insights and things that people like. There's so many people like him, but he's somebody who just comes to mind. Les Brown. He's a
Oh,
terrific speaker. He's really, really fantastic.
wonderful. Wonderful, wonderful. Yeah, I also listen to most of his talks on YouTube, and someone can always find them there on YouTube. Now, two things before we are off air, and one of them is your why. I mean, because finding all these challenges that people find, the challenge of not being judged by people, the challenge of the pain in the stomach, that pain in the diaphragm,
Yeah,
and many other challenges that we face along the way. facing all these kind of things, many people would just give up their dreams, not only on speaking, but any other thing that they are doing in their own life. They would just give up, and maybe they do a live like this one, and it's not as successful as they would want it to have been, and they just say, they call it quits, as they say. And for one to keep on moving, there must be a why, a big why are you doing it? Why? What keeps you going at times when other people would have given up on what you're doing? Maybe you can share us, if it's comfortable with you. What's your why? What keeps you moving? Yeah.
Oh, what keeps me moving is I keep asking myself, what am I here for? What you asked what the why is. I've asked myself, why am I here? Why have I had these experiences? Why have these things happened to me? What constructive things can I do with this? Something I talk about when I'm sort of introducing my workshops is I got to a low point when I was a teenager, and where I mentioned it earlier about feeling very restricted, etc., not feeling like I could be myself, and all the rest of it. And there was a point where I just thought to myself, God, if I'm feeling like this so often, then almost like, what's the point in being here? Like, what if I don't feel like I can communicate myself properly or easily? If it's such a struggle, then it's like, what's the point in leaving the house in the morning? What's the point in going to work? I had a macabre feeling just like that. So it's about, I think, a change in attitudes and how you look at things. So my big why is I don't want people to feel like that, because I know we've all got so much to offer. I know all of us are so talented, and we've got so much to contribute in our own different ways, in things we're interested in and things we're good at. But so many people, I think, were like me, where they felt like they couldn't do that. They felt it difficult to get to that point where they could make that contribution, or they didn't feel like they were worthy of speaking their mind and making that contribution, as I keep saying. So that's my big why. I want to offer my own reflections on things I've experienced. People tell me it's useful, and as long as I will carry on doing that, I will carry on trying to give insights about how I think you can make that transition, about how you can get from feeling like things are too difficult, or feeling like feeling down, just basically feeling down or depressed about things, how you can move from that to a point where you just think, screw it, I'm here for a reason. I'm not going to let this get me down. It's going to be difficult. You're going to take hits. People are going to reject you. People aren't going to understand you. People might call you names, all this type of stuff. But you're doing it for the right reasons, and people will take positive things out of what you're doing. So therefore, it's worthwhile going through all of that. I make it sound so easy. It's not easy necessarily, but it is a lot more straightforward, and it is a lot more rewarding and meaningful than sort of sitting there and letting this all get on top of you, which is where I was, but I've moved on from there.
Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you very much, Stephen. We
Thank
are
you.
very honored to have you. Last but not least, what would you tell the viewer? What would you tell the viewer?
We have viewers.
Finding your voice and being your authentic self.
I thought it was just us having this conversation.
We have viewers, yes.
Yeah, I was wondering who those people are.
We have quite a number have been watching, and I know even after we are off air, because this video is gonna still be there on my page, quite a good number is going to watch this video.
Yes.
So those who are viewing now and those who are going to come and view it much more later, what would you tell them?
There's lots of things I could tell them, but in a nutshell, I would say you should put yourself in situations that demand a lot from you. You should put yourself in environments where you develop and grow. You do have to push yourself out of your comfort zone. It's such a cliche, but it's very, very true.
Yep.
You will not get better. You will not improve. Your confidence won't increase if you don't place demands upon yourself, upon your own abilities and skills. And public speaking is a skill, as is so many things. So you have to back yourself. You have to trust yourself, and you have to take action in that regard in the first instance to get confidence, to become more at ease, I guess, with who you are as a person, to get closer to being authentic and being the real you. You have to put yourself in difficulty. You have to challenge yourself. You have to let your guard down, and allow yourself to be wounded, really, because that's what being vulnerable means. You have to put yourself in a position where you might screw up. You might stand up and you might stutter. You might forget what to say, or you might not make very much sense. But you keep doing it. You keep plowing on through that, and you keep going and again, and you take consistent action. And after a while, you can't not improve your confidence from that. And you also, just finally, you have to, we don't have to, but I'm suggesting that you simply become acquainted with just telling the truth, with just speaking your mind. When people ask you, how are you? When people ask you a certain question, be radically honest, and keep doing that. Keep being honest, and you'll find you don't actually end up hurting too many people's feelings from that. You'll find you've been oversensitive to what other people might think of you, but really, no one cares that much. No one cares too much about that. That's all I have to say on that, Anthony. We could go on for hours on this.
Wow. Yeah, that's very wonderful to the viewers that are viewing and those who are going to view after we are off air. And it's been quite a wonderful, wonderful experience. This being our very first ASM live show here, Anthony Samuel Moirore and my friend
Stephen Lynch.
We are glad. Stephen Lynch.
Yes.
Now, and since maybe people may want to follow up with you, there is always that one person out of the many who wants to follow up with someone and would want to follow up with you, maybe organize some more workshops, speaking workshops for their school, their organization, their church, whatever it is. How can they find you apart from maybe Facebook? They will see the name Stephen Lynch.
Yeah, it's a long story there.
And maybe long story. Maybe there's a website. There's a telephone number that you leave the people with. They can get you. And
yes, absolutely.
Go ahead.
There's a couple of Facebook pages that I operate. So first is called Stephen Lynch Public Speaking.
Yes.
Stephen with a PH. Yep. Lynch, Lynch. Yeah. I think the Facebook handle is Lynch Spiration, which is quite an amusing pun.
Okay.
And secondly, there's a Facebook group that I've got. I'll literally just give you the URL of it. It's facebook.com/groups LPGAD, and that stands for London Personal Growth and Development. So you can look up either of those Facebook pages and groups and just drop me a message through there. And
let's make it simple. Once we are off this broadcast, post us those links there in the comments.
I'll do that.
So the people, instead of going and searching on Facebook, just post them on the comments and someone will just come into the comment and we will follow you wherever you can be found.
Fantastic.
So thank you very much. Once again, Stephen, it's been a wonderful. We are honored to have you on our first ASM live show.
Thanks a lot.
We look forward to having many more shows during the coming weeks. I mean, every week, maybe at least one show. We're gonna organize that. We're gonna put ourselves there out of the comfort zone, and it's such an honor, Stephen, to have you in our show. Thank you very much, Steve.
Thank you, Anthony. It's been a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thank you for having me, and thank you everybody for listening.
Yeah, so this is once again, Anthony Samuel Muirore of AnthonySamuel.com, and my friend
Stephen Lynch.
Say
goodbye.
And we are saying bye.
Adios.
For now. Bye.
Bye for now.
Yeah, adios. Yep.